The morning of September 27th, 2023, began like countless others in Croydon, South London. Students hurried along the busy streets, backpacks slung over shoulders, making their way to school as the city stirred to life. Among them was 15-year-old Eliane Andam, a bright and beloved student from Old Palace School, walking with friends near the bustling Whitgift Centre shopping complex. Eliane was the kind of teenager who drew people to her, warm, loyal and fiercely protective of those she cared about. On this particular morning, she was supporting a friend through a difficult time. The friend had recently ended a relationship with 17-year-old Hassan Sentamu, and the breakup had left lingering tensions and unfinished business between them. The previous day, September 26th, had already shown warning signs of the tragedy to come. Eliane and her friends had encountered Sentamu at the Whitgift Centre, where what started as casual interaction had turned uncomfortable. The girls had playfully teased him, but their light-hearted banter seemed to strike a nerve with the teenager, who was already struggling with the end of his relationship. Unknown to Eliane and her friends, that encounter had planted seeds of rage in Sentamu's mind. He spent the night brooding over the perceived humiliation, his anger festering into something far darker. By morning he had made a chilling decision. He would arm himself with a kitchen knife before meeting his ex-girlfriend again. The meeting had been arranged under the pretense of returning personal belongings, the kind of awkward exchange that often follows teenage breakups. Sentamu had promised to bring back items that belonged to his former girlfriend, including what would become the most tragically symbolic object in this entire case, a teddy bear that held sentimental value for the young woman. When the group converged near the Whitgift Centre that morning, the atmosphere was already tense. Sentamu arrived carrying a bag of his ex-girlfriend's possessions, but something was clearly wrong with his demeanor. Those who witnessed the encounter later described him as agitated and unpredictable, his body language suggesting barely contained fury. What happened next unfolded with devastating speed. As Sentamu's ex-girlfriend moved to retrieve her belongings from the bag, tensions escalated rapidly. Eliane, ever the loyal friend, stepped forward to help her friend collect her possessions. In that moment of solidarity, she grabbed the bag containing the teddy bear and other personal items. This simple act of friendship, helping a friend reclaim her belongings, triggered an explosion of violence that no one could have anticipated. Sentamu's rage, which had been building since the previous day's encounter, erupted with terrifying intensity. In what prosecutors would later describe as a moment of white-hot anger, he produced the knife he had concealed and launched his attack. The assault was swift and merciless. Witnesses described a frenzy of movement as Sentamu struck Eliane multiple times, focusing his attack on her neck area. The 15-year-old girl, who moments before had been helping her friend, now found herself fighting for her life in broad daylight on a busy London street. The horror of the scene was amplified by its public nature. Dozens of horrified passers-by watched in shock as the attack unfolded. Passengers on nearby buses witnessed the violence through their windows, powerless to intervene as the teenager carried out his devastating assault. The entire incident was captured on CCTV cameras, preserving forever the brutal reality of how quickly a morning could turn from ordinary to tragic. Despite the presence of so many witnesses, the attack was over within moments. Eliane collapsed, critically wounded, as Sentamu fled the scene. Emergency services rushed to the location, but the injuries proved too severe. The promising young life that had begun that morning with hopes of another day at school was slipping away on the pavement outside a shopping centre. The immediate aftermath brought chaos and confusion to the area. Police cordoned off the scene as paramedics fought desperately to save Eliane's life. Her friends, traumatized by what they had witnessed, struggled to comprehend how a simple exchange of belongings had led to such devastating violence. The teddy bear that had been at the center of the dispute lay forgotten amid the tragedy that had consumed everything else. Word of the attack spread rapidly through the local community and beyond. Parents picking up their phones to routine messages from friends instead received urgent warnings about a serious incident near the school. Social media buzzed with conflicting reports and growing concern as the gravity of the situation became clear. Hassan Sentamu's flight from the scene was short-lived. Police launched an immediate manhunt, and he was apprehended quickly. The 17-year-old, who just minutes before had been in a murderous rage, now faced the reality of what he had done. The knife that had ended Eliane's life became evidence in what would soon become a murder investigation. As news of Eliane's death reached her family, friends, and school community, the impact was devastating. Teachers who had watched her grow and develop her potential struggled to process the loss. Classmates who had shared laughs and lessons with her just the day before now faced the incomprehensible reality that she would never return to their shared corridors and classrooms. The investigation that followed revealed disturbing details about Sentamu's background. Police discovered that he had a history of aggressive behavior toward young women and had previously been found carrying knives. These revelations raised uncomfortable questions about whether warning signs had been missed and whether Eliane's death could have been prevented. When the case came to trial, the prosecution painted a picture of premeditated violence. They argued that Sentamu had deliberately armed himself before the meeting, suggesting his intent to cause harm was formed well before the actual confrontation. The fact that he had brought a knife to what was supposed to be a simple exchange of personal belongings demonstrated, they contended, that he had prepared for violence. The defense team faced the challenging task of arguing for a lesser charge. They acknowledged that Sentamu had caused Eliane's death but claimed it was manslaughter rather than murder, suggesting the attack was a spontaneous act of rage rather than premeditated killing. They pointed to his young age and difficult background as factors that should influence the court's judgment. However, the evidence presented painted a disturbing picture of deliberate preparation and calculated violence. The prosecution successfully argued that bringing a weapon to the meeting demonstrated intent, and that the severity and targeted nature of the attack showed clear murderous purpose. The jury was also presented with the CCTV footage, which showed the brutal reality of Sentamu's actions in devastating detail. Throughout the trial, Eliane's family maintained a dignified presence, seeking justice for their beloved daughter while grappling with their profound loss. Their victim impact statements revealed the depth of their grief and the ripple effects of the tragedy that had torn through their lives and community. After careful deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty for murder. The evidence had convinced them that this was not a spontaneous act, but a deliberate taking of life by someone who had armed himself and chosen violence over any other resolution to his anger and humiliation. The sentencing phase brought additional revelations about the impact of Eliane's death. Teachers spoke of a bright student with unlimited potential whose future had been cruelly cut short. Friends described her loyalty and kindness, the very qualities that had led her to support her friend on that fatal morning. Her family's statements revealed the ongoing trauma and irreparable loss they faced every day. Judge Mrs. Justice Chimagrub, in delivering the sentence, acknowledged the devastating impact of the crime, while also noting Sentamu's age at the time of the offense. She sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 23 years, meaning he would not be eligible for parole until well into his 40s. In her sentencing remarks, the judge emphasized the premeditated nature of the attack and the tragic loss of a young life full of promise. She noted that while Sentamu's youth was a mitigating factor, the seriousness of his crime and his previous history of violence toward women demanded a substantial sentence that reflected both punishment and public protection. The case highlighted broader issues about youth violence and the tragic ease with which conflicts can escalate to fatal outcomes. The fact that such devastating violence had erupted over something as innocent as a teddy bear seemed to symbolize how trivial disputes can mask deeper problems and lead to irreversible consequences. For Eliane's school community, the tragedy became a catalyst for discussions about conflict resolution, friendship, loyalty, and personal safety. Her teachers and classmates struggled to understand how an act of loyalty, helping a friend retrieve her belongings, had led to such a devastating outcome. The ripple effects of Eliane's death extended far beyond her immediate circle. Her story became a stark reminder of how quickly ordinary situations can turn dangerous, and how the combination of teenage emotions, relationship conflicts, and access to weapons can create deadly outcomes that destroy multiple lives in moments. As Hassan Sentamu began his life sentence, the community continued to mourn Eliane Andam, a 15-year-old whose life was defined not by how it ended, but by the loyalty, friendship, and kindness she had shown throughout her brief but meaningful existence. Her death over a teddy bear became a symbol of senseless loss, a reminder that behind every act of violence are real people whose potential and promise are lost forever. The case stands as a tragic testament to how small conflicts can escalate with devastating consequences, and how one moment of rage can destroy not just the victim's future, but the perpetrators as well, leaving families and communities to grapple with grief and questions that may never have satisfactory answers.